Hi, my name is Rachel Tepper, and we're going to go ahead and get started. I think first we're going to introduce the staff that's on the call today. So we're going to put up our pictures and say hello. So I'll get started. My name is Rachel Tepper, and I'm a long-range planner with the City of Austin Planning and Zoning Department.
Maureen?
Yes, my name is Maureen Meredith. I am the case manager for this case. I do all the plan amendment cases. I also work in the long range planning department with the planning and zoning department.
Hello, my name is Mark Walters. I'm a principal planner with the planning and zoning department, and I'll be moderating this evening's questions.
Jeff, I think you're on mute.
David?
Sorry. Yep. You want to introduce yourself, David?
Good evening. My name is David Hartman, and I'm a real estate attorney and land use attorney, excuse me, and a representative of the applicant, Wayfinder Properties.
And I'm Mac McElrath with Wayfinder, and we are the applicant.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. If you haven't already, if you click on the URL, it should take you to a sign-in page. And if you're on the phone, please stay muted. I think there'll be time for questions at the end. Next slide, please. So before we get started, I just wanted to show you a little bit about the Teams interface. So thank you for joining us today. I believe that your screen might look a little bit like this picture on the screen here, except for instead of live event started, it should have this presentation. If you'd like to communicate with us throughout this event, you can do so with the Q&A box, which should be on the right side of the screen. And there's a purple bar that says ask a question. So you can ask a question or make a comment throughout the meeting. And at the end, we will moderate your questions and say them out loud for people to respond. I think we've lost the screen.
Hold on a sec.
Okay, so we wanted to show you also that live captions are available. If you're not listening to the live interpretation in Spanish, but speak perhaps another language, or if you'd like the live captions in English, you can access those on the bottom bar all the way to the right. There's a little icon that says CC. You click on that and you can select different languages to see the closed captions of the conversation tonight.
So hello, my name is Maureen Meredith. I will be doing the presentation for the staff part. So this application is a property that is in the Southeast Combined Neighborhood Planning Area in the Southeast Subdistrict. The case number is NPA 2020-0014.01. There's my contact information here. Zoning case manager is Wendy Rhodes, and there's her contact information. This information is also in the public hearing notice that you received, the community meeting notice that you received in the mail. Next slide. So the agenda tonight, I'll go over some more case information. We'll introduce the presenters. David Hartman will be presenting for the applicant. We'll set some meeting ground rules. We'll talk about how to participate in the process. We'll talk about why there is a plan amendment application and what is a future land use map. Then after my presentation is ended, we'll go into the applicant's presentation. Then we will open the floor for the question and answers. So here's some more case information. As I said, it's in the Southeast Combined Neighborhood Planning Area. The property address is 7135 East Ben White Boulevard. It's about 18 acres. Case number NPA 2020-0014.01. The request is to change the future land use map from industry to multifamily. The associated zoning case number is C14 2020-0042. The zoning request is to change the zoning from limited industrial neighborhood plan to multifamily 4 neighborhood plan. And there we have the property owner's name. And again, the agent applicant is David Hartman. So here are the basic ground rules. As you know, with COVID-19, we have a need for social distancing. So in-person questions and comments have been moved to this online chat live event. You will not be able to speak during this meeting, but can ask questions and make comments using the chat function. Any threats, personal attacks, profanity, racial epithets, or slurs used on this virtual chat will not be published. Staff reserves the right to remove offenders from the meeting. Questions will be answered in the order they are received, and similar questions may be grouped and answered together. So how to participate in this process? All questions will be answered and made available by request within 5 business days on the website. This is the website that was on the notice that you received in the mail. You can also email or call the case managers, either me or Wendy, if you have any more questions or comments after this meeting. If you provide written comments that you would like added to our staff reports, we will add them and they will go before Planning Commission and City Council. If you received this community meeting notice in the mail, that means you are within 500 feet of the property, and when the case is scheduled for Planning Commission and City Council, you will receive that public hearing notice in the mail, and the notice will also describe how you can participate in the public hearings. So why is there a plan amendment? So neighborhood plans are adopted by City Council, and they're amendments to the Imagine Austin Comprehensive Plan. City Charter requires that zoning changes must be consistent with the Comprehensive Plan. Most neighborhood plan amendments are amendments to the future land use map, and most neighborhood plan amendments have an associated zoning application. So this map shows in blue where we have City Council approved neighborhood plans, most of which have a future land use map. When someone submits a zoning change application that changes the land use on that future land use map, not only do they have to submit a zoning change application, they have to submit a plan amendment application as well. Next slide. So this is what a future land use map looks like. These colors represent broad land uses. For example, the yellow represents single family land uses. The purple represents industrial. So for this property, the land use is industrial, so it is a purple land use. Next slide. So this chart shows the colors that are represented by the land uses, and the column to the left of the colors show the zoning districts that are associated with those land use categories. So for the proposed zoning of MF4, the associated land use would be multifamily, and that would be an orange land use. Next slide. So this map shows where the property is. It's about 18 acres, and this shows the purple land use for the industrial land use. Next slide. And this map shows the existing zoning on the property, which is limited industrial neighborhood plan. Next slide. And here's just a little more information on some background of the case. So this application was filed on March 18th, 2020, which is out of cycle for the Southeast Combined Neighborhood Planning Area. For an out-of-cycle application, the Southeast Combined Neighborhood Plan Contact Team allowed the application to be filed outside of the July open filing period. So as I mentioned, the applicant requests to change the future land use map from industry to multifamily to allow for residential apartments. Again, it's about 18 acres of land, and the existing zoning is limited industrial with the proposed zoning of multifamily 4. Next slide. So that ends my presentation. Next, we'll begin a presentation by David Hartman, the applicant's agent.
Good evening. This is David Hartman, and I'm the land use attorney as the applicant for this rezoning and neighborhood plan amendment. Next slide. This is obviously the project aerial that shows the vicinity west of 183. You can, I guess, note the intersection of Ben White Boulevard, Casey Bridge Court, and Metro Center Drive, and then see the adjacent land uses we'll talk about a little bit more, but note that immediately north of Ben White, for example, are apartments and residential. Next slide. This shows adjacent land uses. You can see on the left-hand side, west side of the property is a hotel, east is a data center, and south as well, and then undeveloped land as well. And you can see again, similarly situated property across Ben White is more apartments to the north. Next slide. As Maureen indicated, this identifies the subject tract, this 18 acres as LI or industrial zoning with the NPA's neighborhood plan. Immediately to the west, you'll see the adjacent zoning is CSMU. And everywhere you see a MU, that area is 56 acres, for example, where residential uses are authorized in that area, as well as across the street to the north, CSMU, where those apartments are, for example. So this is basically changing the LI to residential, very similar to other similarly situated tracts. And there are some recent rezoning that's off screen along towards the intersection of Montopolis and Ben White that is residential as well. Next slide. This is just another representation of the FLUM that shows this tract as being industry. Next slide. This shows the airport overlay map, which demonstrates that this particular tract location is comfortably outside of the airport overlay area. And the reason that's important is areas that are inside the colored areas are basically residential use is prohibited. So that's the importance of that. Next slide. Now we'll finish up with the few slides that are a little more detailed and interesting. Again, 18 acres, that's currently one vacant residential structure. There's no water quality or drainage control. As we've gone through, the adjacent zoning is 56 acres of basically mixed use nearby, as well as industrial zoning. North of Ben White, again, is authorizes residential as well. The adjacent uses we've gone over are hotel, data center, office undeveloped, and some apartments. And the adjacent FLUM we've gone over as well. We're proposing 350 to 375 multifamily units. There'll be 2, 3, and 4-story garden style multifamily units throughout, with access exclusively to Ben White, and we've got a concept map that we'll go over as well. We're really excited about the opportunity to provide over 16 acres worth of public parkland located along Carson Creek in connection with this project. And that parkland is going to provide some some connectivity to Metro Center Drive, which we showed earlier. We appreciate the contact team March 9th authorizing filing our neighborhood plan application out of cycle, and we really look forward to our continued dialogue with the contact team over coming weeks and months. We submitted the applications to change the FLUM from industry to multifamily and change the zoning from industrial, light industrial to MF4, multifamily 4. And the primary reason we chose that category MF4 is because it allows flexibility in height for some 4-story buildings. Next slide. Now I'll turn it over to Mac McElrath with Wayfinder, the developer.
Thanks, David. So here you're looking at a concept plan of the site. As you can see, there's approximately 350 to 375 units that are laid out across the property. It's combination 2, 3, and 4-story buildings, as David mentioned earlier, that consist of townhome units, some carriage houses above attached garages, and then your more typical apartment building structure. We are entirely surface parking the site, which it just on the grounds that we have greater than 10 acres available to develop, and so consequently a structured garage isn't required. We've got a clubhouse with common area amenities that will be accessible near the entrance to the property, with a pool and associated courtyard amenities that surround it. The materials on the apartment community are going to be, combination of masonry and hardy board materials, and otherwise we're going to play a great deal into the existing landscape that and topography that the site has to offer. Next slide. So perhaps the thing to distinguish most about this apartment community versus many you'll see throughout the city, and David again touched on this earlier, but we've since our meeting with the neighborhood, our initial meeting with the neighborhood plan contact team earlier this year, we heard from certain stakeholders that there was a desire for this to have some sort of destination where the neighborhood could find some means of enjoyment at the property. We since, and over the last 3 months, have been in communication with the Parks Department and think that we have accomplished that goal and more. Specifically, what triggered this is there is a existing trail system that runs through the Metro, through the Met Center development, which Metro Center Drive, if you look at this aerial, runs through, and it's immediately adjacent to this property. If you'll go to the next slide, I can speak to a little more detail to our site. So this gives you a depiction of where the Met Center Trail Network is at present. This trail system that is off-road connects into a pedestrian path along Met Center Drive. That pedestrian path runs all the way to the cul-de-sac that abuts the larger 40-acre tract currently controlled and owned by the seller. So we've got 18 acres up for this zoning application with the Carson Creek as our southern boundary, but Carson Creek runs through the middle of a 40-acre tract, And what we've done since is, in coordination with the Parks Department, identified approximately 16.6 acres of land that encompasses both sides of Carson Creek, as well as a significant amount of acreage outside of Carson Creek and outside the 100-year floodplain, especially as you travel south from Carson Creek, and goes all the way to the Met Center Drive, enabling folks that are or are not residents of the multifamily community to access a future trailhead and trail system that will run along Carson Creek through the entirety of the tract highlighted in yellow and continue westbound. This is consistent with original trail system plans that were included in the Southeast neighborhood plan, but more so it's consistent with what Parks had wished for, with what we agree is a natural and beautiful amenity in Carson Creek. If you'll go to the next slide. And so this is just illustration of what is actually on present at Met Center Drive today. You've got crushed granite and concrete trails running through the Met Center that are that run through a significant amount of green space and green belt, as well as disc golf course. And what we can provide on our property is more of this, but perhaps more attractive, again, direct access to and a visual of Carson Creek as you go through that trail system, and enjoy the larger surroundings that are included in this approximate 16.16 acre give. Next slide.
So this is our final, this is David again. This is our final slide. Just kind of summarizing how the FLUM amendment supports the Southeast Combined Neighborhood Plan. I mean, it's goal number 1 in the plan. It's pretty impressive. Says provide for basically housing options in this area that will contribute to the neighborhood's vitality. And then objective number 1.1 of goal number 1 is explore opportunities for the development of a variety of housing. And then one of the other primary goals, 8, preserve the unique, rare, and significant features of the natural environment. This idea of being sensitive to the natural environment and offering parkland along floodplains, the objective 8.6, is just throughout and predominant throughout the neighborhood plan, and one that we believe that we've been able to put together with this proposal. And just finally, the FLUM amendment, multifamily FLUM amendment, authorizes the above basically housing and related parkland as identified in the goals and objectives of the neighborhood plan. And we request support of the multifamily FLUM amendment and rezoning to MF4 NP, and we'll be happy to answer any questions and look forward to continued dialogue as we move forward over coming weeks and months to Planning Commission and Council with the contact team.
So thank you, David. This is Maureen Meredith again. The next steps for this case will be staff will review the application and report to the other staff members what we heard this evening and also the comments that we received. We will make a recommendation and then we will forward it we'll schedule it for Planning Commission and City Council. If, like I said in the beginning of the meeting, if you received the community meeting notice in the mail, you will also receive the public hearing notice once the cases are scheduled. Again, if you have more questions for us, you can email Wendy and I on at the emails in this slide, and also that was on the community meeting notice as well. I guess we're going to go next to the questions.
So far, we haven't received any questions. but we're happy to answer any question that anybody might have. Jeff,
Hello,
do you
my
want to
name
go?
is Consuelo,
Oh, okay.
and I'm calling by phone, and so I didn't hear anyone give an explanation about how to handle questions over the phone. My computer isn't working, so I'm using my phone. So how can I ask a question from a phone?
Right now?
Yep, you all gave instructions to do it, but since I'm not on my computer, I'm using my smartphone. So how can I ask a question? Is there a procedure for that during this
You can ask
meeting?
the question right now, ma'am.
Okay, very good. So I heard your the information that y'all gave out, and my concern is that this is the Highway 71 that leads into the airport, which is already super congested, and I don't know if you've done a traffic report to this being 300 or 375 units would just add to that. And I noticed that you also mentioned that there was similar apartments across the highway. There are very few, and I believe they are low income, and there are also a very small residential homes, and they're completely pushed to the back, and you hardly know that they're there. And again, I don't think it's anything as large as this. So I would be interested to find out if there's going to be, what are your thoughts on that, and as well as how many of these units would be for low income?
Go ahead, Mac.
Okay, thank you. So taking those in order, so as it relates to traffic, important to note that our egress onto this site is onto the feeder road to Ben White, and is a significant amount of drive aisle both from west to east in terms of the next ingress or egress location. Our next available ingress, which will be right only out of our site, takes you to Riverside Drive as well as the Ben White U-turn, and then ultimately gets you onto Ben White right before the 183-71 intersection, which, as many are aware in this area, is undergoing massive widenings and improvements that should be concluded in that intersection by the end of this year. In light of all of that, there is not a concern for the highway to be able to, for Ben White Boulevard or 183 or the intersection of Ben White and Riverside Drive to be able to accommodate our traffic demands. That said, we'll still go through the coordination process with both the transportation department and ATD to ensure that, you know, our site plan takes into consideration its relative demands to the overall traffic system. As it relates to the uses north of Ben White Boulevard, there are a couple of multifamily communities that run immediately along the Ben White the Ben White westbound feeder. One of those is a age-restricted apartment community. One's a market rate community. I'm not sure, but I think you are correct that the age-restricted community may have some on-site affordability, some smart housing component, but I'd have to research that further. It goes without saying, but as you travel north of those communities, you are almost immediately from this site entering onto Riverside Drive, where there is an abundance of multifamily under construction, starting with or under construction or currently existing, starting with the Broadstone project that is nearing completion near the hotels at the intersection of Ben White and Riverside, the closest intersection to this site, and then traveling west. The important thing to note when you start going down the Riverside Drive corridor and you talk about current planned or under construction developments is that every one of those developments, save for one, has a structured garage, meaning it has concrete parking that is either a podium on which all of the multifamily sits, or it is a wrap garage on which all of the stick frame construction wraps around that garage. That is much more expensive than a surface park community like we are constructing here. There is a give and a get in that. We are able to surface park this community by virtue of the amount of land we are purchasing. We are purchasing this land at a market rate, which makes us still set our rents at what we call market rents, but our market rents are of significant discount to any planned or under construction market rate apartment communities along the Riverside corridor, beginning less than half a mile away from the site. And will also be so a discount to the 2 multifamily communities currently planned along Ben White Boulevard, or currently under planning along Ben White Boulevard. And all of that goes back to the reality that our parking structure is so much less expensive. So when we decided to get this site under contract, we did so with the realization that when we do a market study of the southeast central submarket and the east central submarket for Austin, Texas, and we look at what our market rate, what the occupancy is of our market rate that we're quoting here versus the much higher market rates of Riverside Drive, you're sitting at a place where we're at 94.7% occupancy along the east side corridor for Austin, or east central corridor for like kind product. You're at 95.8% occupancy along the southeast central, or within the southeast central submarket. So there is a tremendous amount of demand for units at this price point, and we think it is because, you know, we're offering a price range that falls much more in line and is far more affordable to those living in that submarket than what's under construction along the Riverside corridor.
Could you give those prices, or I hear you talking a lot of numbers, and I'm just wondering if you have like what kinds of rents are we talking about? Because I didn't hear you mention that there were specifically units for low income, and that's really something that Austin really needs.
So prices range right now from $900 to $2,000 on the project. And again, that price range within the southeast central submarket sits at 95.8% occupancy. So there is pent-up demand, to be sure, in that price range in this immediate submarket. 90% is a healthy occupancy for multifamily. 95.8% is not, and demands additional supply. And you compare that to the Riverside corridor, where you're talking about a 50% increase in construction costs, somewhere between a 35 and 50% increase in construction costs on account of the projects that are under development there at present. And we're able to offer, as a result, a 35 to 50% discount on a lot of those currently planned and under construction communities. Excuse me.
Okay, well, I just wanted you to be mindful and sensitive, because Riverside is low income, and I'm in Southeast Austin, and we're also considered low income. So the community that you're going to be serving, as well as Dow Valley, is low income. And I just asked you to be sensitive to that.
This is David. Those are great comments. Thank you.
Does someone else have a question?
This is Jeff with staff. Just to let people know, we did mute the phones when we started, so if anyone does have a question, they have to unmute themselves. I think it's *6. Rachel, do you know?
think it might be *86.
Hello, this is Anna.
Hi, Anna. This is David. Welcome.
This is, well, I'm just saying right now, I'm finally able to join between going through the web link and then this. So I don't know what all has happened. I don't know who's at the meeting. Will I be able to get I'm not going to slow anything down. Will I be able to get, Maureen, will I be able to get a list of who attended the meeting? Several of us, Francis can't join. We're having difficulty with this.
So what is your question? Or you wanted to know if you can get an attendance list from tonight, or
an attendance? Well, I guess an attendance list. And I mean, what's been said, what's been presented, or maybe it's just being recorded so that we can listen to it later on. Because this is not conducive. This is not being helpful, at least not to me anyway. I don't know if I can be able to get a hold of other people and let them know, find out who else had difficulties with this.
okay. It's my understanding that the presentation tonight is being recorded and that we will be able to upload it to the website. Rachel, is that correct?
Yes, that's our plan.
Okay. Yeah, I'll probably have some feedback on how this process works. Thank you.
So if there's not any more questions, my colleagues, is there anything else you would like to say before we leave?
So there is a question. Catherine Nicely with Mayor Pro Tem Garza's office asks, when we talk about rent prices, what MFI are you using for the prices in rent?
And Catherine, thanks for taking time out to join us. I think the bottom line is that we expect our rents anywhere from as was stated, anywhere from $900 to $2,000 per month, depending on unit size. And we can look at the chart and get back to you as to where that falls, depending on families. Mac, do you have a ready answer to that?
Yeah, I can say that it falls at least somewhere between the 70%. It starts somewhere well south of the 80% MFI number, and with the largest units being in excess of the 80% MFI number, which is why at the end of the day, we're approaching this as a market rate deal, but with the intent for a number of the units starting at $900 to be well below the 80% MFI threshold. But again, it's worth. I'll add to that because it's obviously this is a focal point. So I'll restate one that in this submarket, this price point is 95.8% occupied. So there are existing residents living in abundance within this price point as far as the rent is concerned. The second thing that I'll say is, again, we are operating at a significant discount than any other project currently under construction at market rate in this area, especially along the Riverside corridor, because we are not building the same product, namely parking structures, that they are. And so we're able to come in at a lower price point, which we think is going to be very well received by the overall market and submarket. The last thing that I'll add is we're not participating in any affordable housing programs. We researched low-income housing tax credit options. We also researched partnership with HACA. This is not a priority location, and therefore we're looking at a scenario where there wasn't a subsidy readily available for this site, and as such, by paying a market rate for the property, as that's what it was listed under and intended by the owner, we're beholden to devising an overall development plan with market rates in order to ultimately capitalize and move forward on the project. One other anecdote: the 16.6 acres of land, we certainly have to buy from the seller that we're talking about conveying to parks at the same price that we have to buy the rest of the land. And so that is a response to the neighborhood plan contact team's desire to have a quote destination to, not just destination through, at this overall location. And we think that 16.6 acres of parkland around Carson Creek with a trailhead and trail system continuing through the Met Center and available to all in the greater area is an amenity that everyone, both residents and non-residents of our multifamily community, will be able to enjoy.
Mac, there's a follow-up from Catherine as well, saying that $2,000 a month is high for census tracts in District 2, just to let you know.
And that, again, on the $2,000 a unit, we have some townhome units, if you look at the concept plan, that are large 3-bedroom, 2.5-bath units. And it is those units that are garnering the higher rent. The 1s and 2 bedrooms do not come close to that $2,000 number.
Is there any other questions, people on the phone, or is another question?
Yes, sir. I just had another follow-up comment. I didn't give you my name earlier. I apologize. My name is Consuelo. And you just said you weren't working with any of the city programs because this wasn't a target area. But you recognize, if you drive by down Riverside, you do see all the homeless camps. You do recognize that there is a housing shortage.
Oh, absolutely.
And there's homeless all up and down 71 under the bridges on Ben White. So it doesn't matter that it's not a target area. All you have to do is look around. If you're not from here, I'm not sure if you are.
Yeah, so I live in the East Riverside Corridor District. That's where I live and have lived for 10 years. And so I'm very familiar with the area. I grocery shop next to where that homeless encampment is. And we're not building a homeless shelter. That said, there are homeless shelters in proximity to this area with what we're being told as vacancy in a couple of those shelters as well. We're not building a homeless shelter, though. We're building a multifamily for rent apartment community. I do not challenge for a second that affordability is an issue in Austin, Texas, not for 1 second. And I think that, we're going to be able to make a dent in that by addressing a 95.8% occupancy rate in this market for this rent rate by delivering 350 to 375 units to try and satiate that appetite to some extent.
Okay. There's another comment from Catherine in Mayor Pro Tem Garza's office. She wanted to know there's a lot here, so it's going to take me a second to unpack. Can you please provide me with the breakdown of the units that will be, what is your breakdown of the family units and MFI that will be used in the future? I understand there are existing residents overall in the city. They can pay this, but when we calculate the MFI, it's just for the city as a whole and not necessarily for the District 2. And she saying that her constituents she hears from constituents that there's not enough affordable housing and attainable housing in District 2. So I guess what is your unit mix, kind of? I think part of that question.
Yeah.
Sure. So our unit range and again, this is just based on data and overall occupancy for each of these unit types within the Southeast Central and East Central submarkets. But with Southeast Central in particular is what we're responding to at the mix. And at present, at this stage in the project, we are targeting between 60 and 70% 1-bedrooms, with the remaining 30 to 40% of those units falling amongst 2 and 3 bedrooms. I don't have a granular 1, 2, and 3 bedroom unit mix because truthfully, our concept plan is the extent to which we've arrived at our density at this juncture, which is kind commonplace, at this stage in our rezone. As it relates to the final question, it probably goes without saying that I can't tell you exactly how many units fall within or below the 80% MFI, other than to say that we start at $900, which is a couple $100 at minimum, maybe $300 below the starting number for 80% MFI. And so we have a number of units that will be at 80% MFI by virtue of being market rate. But again, we're approaching this as a market rate deal, as that was what we pro forma'd in order to be able to put this site under contract, and which is a large and extensive site, while giving 16.6 acres of parkland to the city, which we have to pay for, which parks will not be paying for.
Okay. Anyone out there watching this, if there are any other questions, please submit them. And we know that there is a delay from when we talk to what you hear us, so we'll wait a little bit to make sure that you have an opportunity to answer or ask a question.
So this is Anna. Are y'all going to be complying with the Atlas 14 guidelines, rules?
Yes, that's adopted citywide. We'll be complying with that.
Okay, and also to add to what Catherine nicely was referring to, this is, because of the, as far as 80%, it's not affordable to most of District 2 occupants. So, I mean, I heard the reference to you're designing this for central Southeast Austin, which I'm thinking you're looking at Riverside. But once you start going south of Ben White, it's a poorer. So, I mean, your version, 80% MFI or 80% MFI is not going to be putting any dent, and it's not going to help any of the families that are in this area. So just letting you know, this is not, I don't see how this is benefiting the community. I know you're arguing that there's parkland, but I don't know how this is benefiting the community as far as affordable housing. That is unique to not based on the overall numbers for Austin, but the numbers specific to District 2.
And again, I would just say that we're doing everything that we can, in the sense that it's the Southeast Central District that sits at 95.8% occupancy within this price point, not just along the Riverside corridor, but stretching down to Ben White Boulevard as well. And that at that occupancy within these rates, there is not another multifamily development project under construction proposing these rates. They're proposing much higher. We're offering a much lower rate, which we think new residents will flock to and appreciate, as other options are less affordable. And to the point of parkland, I'm glad to hear that you acknowledge that and think that that's something that is of benefit to the community. We hope and think it is too. There are a number of people that live and call the Southeast neighborhood area their home already, and with no intention of moving from those homes. And while a multifamily apartment community may be built on 18 acres of this tract, or on about 10.5 acres of this tract, but within an 18-acre rezone, they'll be able to come to this property for many years to come and enjoy 16+ acres of public open parkland space that we will be giving to the city and will not be compensated for.
So there's no more questions in the chat box, and if any of our callers have any, we can wrap it up. And Maureen, I guess you can, your contact information is up. That is correct on the screen?
Yes, and like we said, after the meeting ends, if people have questions, don't hesitate to email or call either me or Wendy. For people who watch the presentation later on because of whatever difficulties you might have had tonight, again, don't hesitate to call or email us if you have questions after watching the presentation. If we can't answer them, we'll forward them to the applicant and get any responses from them. Again, the next steps will be Planning Commission and City Council, and you'll be receiving a notice in the mail once those dates have been finalized.
So I guess with that, I guess we'll be signing off. And if you have questions, you can contact the case managers. Thank you for watching, and have a good evening.